Outriders, Exiled, Captains, welcome to another update from Loot Universe, and today I want to talk about the inventory restoration that the developers for Outriders have been working on. The reason this is a topic for me, or at least of a particular interest, is I think that to this point we have been praising of the developers. We have provided nothing but all the praise for the communicative work, the updates, the constant updates, the Twitters, the Reddit posts, and also the transparency, the detail in which the developers, and particularly the Square Enix community managers, have been going in order to address problems and concerns with the game. And it's been refreshing. That said, we're at a point now where it's very interesting. In our last update, I made reference to the fact that a lot of Outriders are coming towards or are being very, very well established in endgame already. You essentially have a number of players, maybe 20-30% are running at high level CT of all the players, running expeditions, maybe challenge tier 13 to 15. You've likely, and again I'm just speculating, but I think that's a fair reasonable speculation, you've then got probably the next 30% or 40% of gamers in a position where they've just entered endgame or are just dabbling in endgame, whether it's high level world tiers or low level challenge tiers, perhaps running expeditions solo or with a group. And then of course lastly you have, I would argue, the bulk. So maybe the remaining 50% approximately of players who the average gamer is playing through the campaign, maybe has a few kids, is keeping busy, and has a life, and all those wonderful things that get in the way. And I think that's a fair amount of players. So in short, I think there's three, broadly speaking, types of players currently engaged in Outriders and heading towards endgame. And I think to this point, a lot of us have been dabbling and enjoying solo. But the reality is there are significant issues that remain with the co-op multiplayer element of Outriders. And that's whether you are matchmaking or whether you are meeting with other players and engaging with other players, it doesn't matter. The technical issues that we're experiencing, from rubber banding, particularly if you're a guest to someone else hosting, connection issues, and the delay in the use of abilities that we've seen in multiplayer as well. So all these things have compounded to an experience that, to be fair, for a lot of players right now, has not been a satisfactory co-op multiplayer experience. Now, I think to this point it hasn't been a significant issue because the loot game is tight, the gameplay is right, Outriders is an enjoyable game, and as a solo campaign game, it pays off. The loot keeps coming, and the adventures are great. But the real issue here is we're in a different part this week. I think as this week kicks off and as the next week starts, we're at a point where more and more players are at endgame, more and more players are experiencing challenge tiers, and at least getting into the point where co-op and multiplayer, as per the original dev's design, is going to be essential. At this point, the game is not playable in that state. It really is not, and we're having significant issues in many multiplayer sessions that we connect to, and I think many players are as well. Why I bring this up is because I think the developers have been so focused and entrenched in the inventory wipe issue, with due fairness, that they haven't had the ability to even look at the challenges that they're experiencing or that are experiencing in endgame. Now, what I'm alluding to is the fact that the time they've invested, and in particular, the most recent patch notes that we've talked about with the inventory restoration, there appears to be an exceptional amount of time that has been spent in working on the restoration solution. There is a very specific identification of Group A, Group B, and Group C players. There is specifics about what those players have lost and when. There is specifics about the type of restoration each of those groups will get. So Group A, for example, if you lost your gear and had a locked character, you're getting this. If you just lost your gear but your character is not locked and you can access it, you're going to get this. And lastly, if you're Group C, well, all is well in your land. Now, there is very detailed notes, very specific notes, and the transparency is awesome. But the reality is the developers are looking at data and analytics, and what they're looking at is very, very simple. They're essentially looking at your character, and they're discussing or assessing whether or not you lost gear or whether or not you dismantled gear. That's it. The trigger event for this review is essentially, if you had X gear and you no longer had X gear, how did you lose it? If the answer is dismantled, then ignore. If the answer is not dismantled, then we have a wipe situation. Now, that's a very simplistic yet smart approach that the developers are taking to make sure that they don't miss anyone in this review. My point of this discussion is there seems to be so much time invested in the restoration of loot and the appreciation of the community that I think we're at a point now where the rest of the game's issues need to be getting addressed. I think this restoration problem is in the high interest of goodwill to customers, and I respect that and I appreciate that. But I just get the feeling that what we're doing here in this massive review, in the amount of effort they're putting into reviewing this, is catering to the players that are going to be the most noisy. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, after all. But I feel that this is at the detriment to the rest of the game's issues. I might be in the wrong here, but in my opinion, I know I'm going to piss off a few people with this, but I just feel that they need to work out a very quick solution, a very quick reward recognition appreciation solution, whether that's a whole kit or a series of items. Maybe it's 6 or 7 items that are randomly god rolls. I don't know, something that is going to appeal on a mass audience scale that is a quicker resolution. Going through the nuance and the little idiosyncrasies of what is involved to fix this problem for me, I think appeals to the vocal minority on Reddit and Twitter, but I feel overall, if they were to show some appreciation, reward and recognition with some loot, but then show, okay, we're not going to restore every single nuanced item that was in your gear, we're going to give you some stuff, right? And then what we're going to do is going to do this update, we're going to work on this stuff because this is a core part of how I want to improve the game, I think we'd be in a better place. My real worry is that this is a distraction. This whole process, this wipe, as critical as it is, and I think as unacceptable as it has been for a launch game. In a looter shooter game, to have something like inventory wiping is completely unacceptable, and players do have a right to be frustrated. But I think in the need to appeal to gamers and to try and be, charismatic and influential and engaging and supportive of community, I think they've pushed too far here and they've promised too much in the resolution. I think that they should have gone, as I mentioned, with a more simpler reward approach, appreciation approach, whether it be that mixed gear or mixed loot, mixed weaponry, I don't know. Maybe they give you a series of choices where you have, 9 selections of choices of 3, like we get during the game. And you have 9 instances of those choices available to you, and they're all god rolls, and they're all across different parts or diversity of loot. I don't know, something like that just seems like a broader appeal and a smarter strategy so they can get back to what counts. They need to get back to resolving the technical issues, the bandwidth issues, the lagging, the problems that we are experiencing in multiplayer co-op games. I want to play this game with my friends. I've got another group of friends outside of our community that love this game, but they're not touching it. They are off and away from this game because they know, up until now at least, we've had the obviously wipe issue, and then we've had rubber banding issues and connection issues. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out there. That's how I'm feeling right now. I'm very curious to how you guys think in the community. I'd love to hear in the comments what your thoughts are. What's your experience been so far? We have loved this game, but I think we're at this turning point. Outriders has hit a turning point in its release. It's only 20 days old now. It's very young in the contrast of a lot of games, but we need to remember this is not a live service game. This game is not in it for the long tail, at least from what we know right now. So I think by trying to appeal to the audience members like they are right now, I think they're cutting themselves short, and I think it's a distraction from some of the other things that they might better be off working on. The other question to that, of course, is will they actually work on some of these things? We've got to be realistic. Like I said a moment ago, this is not a live service game, and it was never touted to be a live service game. So at the end of the day, a lot of us, with all due respect, may not expect a lot of those fixes to come to fruition. We're going to see some updates, we're going to see some patches, and we're going to see some balancing. The devs have promised that. New content, not necessarily, that might be on the horizon, but at the very least, balancing and updates have been promised. as I say, I don't know how much of the improvements that the community is being asking for, whether it be balancing, whether it be looking at the OP-ness of some of the enemies, and some of the problems with things like timed expeditions, amongst, of course, all the other problems that I've mentioned in terms of multiplayer. I don't know, because at the end of the day, as I said, not being a live service game, we're kind of in uncharted territory. This is the most unlive service game you can get. It has all of the nuances, positives and negatives of a live service game, but it is not in itself a live service. Anyway, these are the challenges that we have right now. These are the things that are on my mind. Curious to hear again your thoughts. Drop a like, subscribe, say hello, check us out on Twitter, which is @LudoUniverse. We will keep this discussion going because we're very keen to see where it will go, and of course, the future of Outriders. I'm going to leave it there. I am Ogaz for LudoUniverse, and I'll see you next out in Enoch.